This story is titled, Daughter Chose Her Stepdad to Walk Her Down the Aisle Despite Me Raising Her Alone After Her Mom Ditched Her Years Ago. Hi, everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing videos. All right, let's get started. Hey, Reddit. I never thought I'd be airing this out here, but I don't know where else to turn. I'm 46, a single dad who raised my daughter, Emily, now 26, basically on my own after her mom, Vanessa, bailed when she was just 5 years old. Yeah, Vanessa just straight up left us. No big fight, no buildup. One day she said she needed space, and then she was gone. I knew later why she did that, but I won't spill the tea now. You'll find out later in the story. So I was left holding the bag, trying to figure out how to raise a kid on my own. It wasn't easy, but I did it. I worked long hours, made sure Emily had everything she needed, and showed up for all the little and big moments in her life. For 12 years, it was just the two of us. Emily was my whole world, and I like to think I did a decent job. I was there for every scraped knee, every school event, every tough day. Of course, she'd ask about her mom from time to time, especially as she got older. Where is she? Why did she leave? Was it my fault? That last one broke me every time. I'd tell her, no, sweetheart, it wasn't your fault. Your mom loves you. She just needed to go somewhere else. I never badmouthed Vanessa, even though, honestly, I wanted to. I figured Emily would come to her own conclusions when she was older. Fast forward to when Emily turned 17. Out of nowhere, Vanessa reappeared. It was a regular Saturday afternoon. I was outside working on the lawn while Emily was upstairs studying for a history test. The doorbell rang, and I figured it was a neighbor or maybe a delivery. But when I opened the door, there she was, Vanessa. She looked different, all polished up, carrying some expensive purse, and smiling like we were old friends catching up after coffee. James, she said, all sweet like nothing had happened. Before I could even process what to say, Emily came downstairs and froze at the sight of her. Mom? She whispered, like she wasn't sure if she was dreaming. Vanessa lit up and opened her arms. Emily ran into them, and they hugged like no time had passed. Meanwhile, I just stood there in the doorway, feeling like a damn outsider in my own house. I wish I could say that was the worst of it, but oh no. Vanessa wasn't just back to say hello. She came armed with a whole new story, one where I was the bad guy. And as much as I wanted to tell the whole story of how harmful Vanessa was, I kept it to myself because I didn't want to break Emily's heart. Over the next few weeks, she started spending more and more time with Emily. Lunches, shopping trips, you name it. I didn't want to stop them from reconnecting. Emily deserved to know her mom. But Vanessa wasn't just reconnecting. She was rewriting the past. She told Emily she'd left because I was controlling, that I made her life impossible. She claimed she stayed away all those years because she didn't feel safe coming back. And the worst part? Emily started believing her. I mean, she didn't come out and say, I believe Mom. But the questions started. Why didn't you ever try to find her, Dad? Why didn't you let her back sooner? Like I'd been holding the door shut all these years? It wasn't just Vanessa either. She brought along her new husband, Greg. Now, Greg didn't seem like a bad guy. He's one of those overly polite types who smiles a lot and doesn't say much. But Vanessa painted him as some kind of hero, the perfect stepdad who was here to fill in the gaps I'd supposedly left. I could feel the shift in Emily. She started seeing her mom and Greg as this picture-perfect family, while I was just the guy who did the grunt work when they weren't around. One day, Emily hit me with, Mom said you didn't want her around. Is that true? I swear, it felt like someone punched me in the chest. I tried to stay calm. No, Emily, that's not true. Your mom left because she wanted to. I didn't stop her. I didn't even know where she went. She didn't respond, just nodded like she wasn't sure what to believe. That was the worst part, seeing my own daughter doubt me after everything we'd been through. Vanessa kept pushing her, we're one big happy family act. She'd show up with Greg, all smiles, picking up Emily for another outing. I'd watch them leave, feeling like an outsider in my own daughter's life. I figured I just had to wait it out, let Emily come to her senses. But honestly, I wasn't sure how much longer I could take watching Vanessa rewrite history and make herself the hero of Emily's story. So fast forward a few years, and Emily's now 26, engaged to her boyfriend Ryan. I like the guy. He's solid, works hard, treats Emily well, and doesn't come off as a know-it-all like some of the other guys she dated. When she told me they were getting married, I was genuinely happy for her. I figured this would be one of those milestones where we could reconnect. You know? I imagined us working together on the plans, laughing about how stressful weddings are supposed to be, and honestly, I thought I'd play a big part. I mean, I raised her, right? Walking her down the aisle was always something I just assumed I'd do. At first, it seemed like things were going that way. Emily asked for my help with the guest list and even ran some venue ideas by me. She seemed excited to include me, and I told her I'd help cover some of the costs. I'm not rich or anything, but I'd saved up a little over the years and figured it'd be a nice gesture. Of course, Vanessa was lurking around the edges of every conversation. She'd pop up with suggestions about the wedding, flowers, catering, even Emily's dress. At first, I tried to ignore it. It wasn't my place to tell Emily who to listen to. But then Vanessa started making herself the center of the plans. She'd say things like, "Oh, Greg and I have connections with this amazing photographer," or "Greg's friend owns a venue, and he could give us a great deal." Emily seemed all for it, which stung a little, but I let it slide. This was her wedding, after all. Things were rolling along until Emily and I went out for dinner one night. It was supposed to be a casual thing, just catching up and talking about wedding stuff. We were at this little diner we used to go to when she was younger, and I was feeling pretty nostalgic, honestly. We were halfway through our burgers when she hit me with it. "Dad, I've been thinking about the ceremony," she started, looking down at her plate. I nodded, figuring she wanted advice or something. "Yeah? What about it?" She took a deep breath and said, "I think I want Greg to walk me down the aisle." I froze. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. "Greg?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, still not looking at me. "Yeah. He's been such a big part of my life these past few years, and Mom thought it would be meaningful." There it was. Mom thought. Vanessa's fingerprints were all over this. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, staring at her. This was supposed to be my moment. I'd been there for everything. Every school event, every tough day, every achievement. And now she wanted Greg, a guy who showed up halfway through her life, to take my place? "Okay," I finally said, keeping my voice as neutral as I could. Emily looked relieved, like she'd been expecting me to blow up. "I just think it would mean a lot to everyone, you know? It's not about replacing you or anything." Not about replacing me? Then what the hell was it about? The rest of the dinner was a blur. I think I nodded a lot and made some lame comments about how the food was good, but inside I was fuming. How could she not see how hurtful this was? When I got home, I sat down and tried to make sense of it. I went through every memory of raising her, wondering if I'd messed up somewhere. Did I not show her enough love? Did I make her feel like I wasn't there for her? But no, that wasn't it. I knew what this was. This was Vanessa. She'd been working on this for years, planting seeds and twisting the narrative, until Emily believed Greg deserved this moment more than I did. The next day, I made a decision. If I wasn't important enough to walk my own daughter down the aisle, then I wasn't going to help pay for the wedding either. I called Emily and told her straight up, "Look, I love you, and I want you to have the wedding you want, but I can't support something that pushes me aside." She didn't argue. She just said, "I understand," in this quiet voice that made me feel like the bad guy. But what was I supposed to do? Smile and write a check while Greg played the role I'd spent 26 years earning? No thanks. Vanessa, of course, wasted no time jumping in. She called me a few days later, all fake sweetness. "James, I heard you're not helping with the wedding anymore." Emily's really upset. "Yeah, well, maybe she should have thought about that before asking Greg to take my place," I shot back. "James, don't be so dramatic," she said, like I was the one overreacting. "This isn't about you. It's about making everyone feel included." I laughed bitterly. Right. Included. Except for the guy who actually raised her. Vanessa sighed, like she was tired of dealing with me. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Can't you just be happy for her?" Happy? That was rich coming from the woman who walked out on her kid and then swooped back in to manipulate the facts. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. After that, things got tense. Emily barely called, and when she did, it felt forced. Vanessa and Greg were clearly taking center stage in her life, and I was being pushed further into the background. I kept telling myself this was her decision, that I had to respect it, even if it felt like a slap in the face. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being replaced, not just on her wedding day, but in her life. So, after that dinner and the phone call with Vanessa, I was pretty much done bending over backward to make things easier for Emily. At first, I thought maybe she would come around. Maybe she'd realize how much this was hurting me and rethink the whole Greg walking her down the aisle thing. But nope. If anything, it felt like she doubled down. She started acting different, distant, cold, even. She wasn't outright rude, but you know when someone's being polite just to keep the peace? That was Emily. Conversations that used to feel natural now felt forced, like she was just going through the motions. One day I called her to check in, like I usually did. "Hey, Em, how's everything going?" "It's fine," she said, her tone clipped. "I'm really busy with wedding stuff." "Anything you need help with?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "No, Mom and Greg are handling most of it." Of course they were. It stung, but I didn't press. If she didn't want my help unless it's financial, I wasn't going to beg for scraps. Still, it was hard not to feel like I'd been pushed out of her life entirely. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about everything. Vanessa naturally was loving every second of it. She kept popping up with her little passive-aggressive comments like, "Oh, Greg is so excited to be such an important part of Emily's big day." Or, "Emily's been leaning on Greg so much lately. It's really brought them closer." I wanted to tell her to shove it, but I knew that'd only make things worse. Vanessa had a knack for turning every situation into a pity party for herself. If I snapped, she'd just use it as more fuel to paint me as the unreasonable, bitter ex. The final straw came when I found out Vanessa and Greg had essentially taken over the entire wedding. Emily didn't even bother telling me about some of the big decisions. I only heard about them through my sister Laura, who was still trying to play peacemaker. Emily told me she's having Mom and Greg sit at the head table with her and Ryan, Laura mentioned casually one day. "What about me?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She said you'll be at the family table with the other relatives. And if that wasn't enough, Emily started taking things a step further. She told Laura that she didn't think I should even give a speech at the wedding. "It'd be awkward," she said, "since Greg's walking me down the aisle. We don't want it to seem like Dad's overshadowing him." Overshadowing him? Are you kidding me? The guy didn't even show up in her life until she was almost an adult. And now he deserved a moment in the spotlight while I was supposed to sit quietly in the back? It got worse? Laura later mentioned that Vanessa and Emily were talking about leaving my name off the wedding program entirely. No father of the bride. No acknowledgement of my role in her life. Just Vanessa and Greg, front and center. When I heard that, I knew there was no point in trying anymore. They weren't just sidelining me, they were erasing me completely. If that's what they wanted, fine. But I wasn't going to stick around and let it happen. After everything that happened, I finally hit my breaking point. I wasn't going to sit at that wedding, smile politely, and watch some guy walk my daughter down the aisle while I clapped from the sidelines. Nope, not happening. I spent a couple of days thinking about it, trying to weigh my options. Could I suck it up and go, just to avoid the drama? Maybe. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Why should I? I raised Emily. I was there for everything, while Vanessa disappeared and Greg didn't even know she existed. And now I was supposed to sit there and play nice? Nah, I wasn't doing that. So I made up my mind. I wasn't going to the wedding. When I first told Laura, my sister, she wasn't exactly thrilled. "James, she's your daughter," she said, exasperated. "You'll regret not being there." "No, Laura," I replied. "What I'd regret is sitting there watching Greg do what I should be doing. This isn't about me being petty. It's about respect, and Emily's made it clear where I stand." Laura sighed, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. "I get it, but don't you think skipping the wedding will just make things worse? You're handing Vanessa and Greg the narrative on a silver platter." She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to back down. "They're going to twist it no matter what I do," I said. "At least this way, I'm not torturing myself." And boy, did they twist it. As soon as Vanessa caught wind of my decision, the phone call started. At first, she played the concerned co-parent card. "James, are you seriously not coming? Do you realize how much this will hurt Emily?" "She's the one who decided to hurt me, Vanessa," I replied calmly. "I'm just responding to her choice." "Don't be ridiculous," Vanessa said, her tone dripping with condescension. "This isn't about you. It's about Emily and her big day." "I know exactly what it's about," I shot back. "It's about you and Greg taking over, like you've been trying to do since you came back into her life. I'm not playing along." That's when Vanessa shifted tactics. She went from concerned to outright manipulative. "If you don't come, everyone's going to see what kind of father you really are," she said. "You're going to embarrass Emily in front of all her guests." I laughed, but it wasn't because I thought it was funny. "Oh, Vanessa, you've been painting me as the bad guy for years. Don't act like this is something new. If Emily's embarrassed, maybe she should think about why I feel the way I do." Vanessa didn't like that answer. She hung up, but I knew it wasn't over. Next, Emily called. She didn't come out swinging like her mom, but I could hear the frustration in her voice. "Dad, what's this about you not coming to the wedding?" I took a deep breath. "Emily, I've thought about this a lot, and I just can't do it. I can't sit there and watch someone else take my place. It's not fair to me." "It's not about replacing you," she said, her voice rising. "I told you that already. Greg's been important to me too." "And what about me, Emily?" I asked. "Where do I fit in? You've made all these decisions to push me aside, and now you're asking me to just show up and clap politely. I can't do that." Emily sighed heavily, like she was the one being wronged. "I'm trying to make everyone happy, Dad. Why do you have to make this harder?" "I'm not making it harder," I said firmly. "I'm standing up for myself. You made your choice, and this is mine." That didn't go over well. She muttered something about me being selfish and hung up. I sat there for a while after the call, but I knew I couldn't cave. Then the guilt tripping started. Vanessa started calling family members, telling them I was abandoning Emily on her wedding day. Suddenly, I had cousins, uncles, and even my aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in years, calling me to weigh in. "James, come on," one of my cousins said. "It's just one day. Don't let this ruin your relationship with Emily." "It's not one day," I replied. "It's the result of years of Vanessa twisting things to suit her benefit. This is just the final straw." Even my mom chimed in, and while she meant well, it still stung. "Honey, you've always been such a good father. Don't let this be the thing Emily remembers." "Mom, she's the one who decided to cut me out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not going to sit there and let her and Vanessa act like I don't exist. No matter how much they tried to guilt me, I didn't budge. I knew they were all getting their version of the story from Vanessa and Emily, and no one cared to ask me how I felt. The days leading up to the wedding were brutal. Everywhere I turned, someone was asking if I was excited or ready for the big day. I just smiled and nodded, keeping my decision to myself. The last thing I wanted was more people piling on. On the day of the wedding, I stayed home. I didn't want to be anywhere near the chaos. I spent the day cleaning the house, organizing my garage, anything to keep my mind off what was happening. Laura texted me later that evening. "Well, you missed quite the show," she wrote. "What happened?" I asked, half interested. "Vanessa gave a speech about how Greg stepped up as a father figure. Not a single mention of you. I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt." "Figures," I replied. Despite everything, I didn't regret my decision. Sitting at that wedding would have been like rubbing salt in the wound. By staying home, I at least kept my dignity intact. Vanessa and Emily could spin their stories however they wanted, but I knew the truth. Sometimes standing up for yourself means walking away, no matter how much it hurts. After skipping the wedding, I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything. I kept coming back to one question. If Emily was so willing to sideline me in her life now, what did that mean for the future? I realized that if Emily could do this now, then it wasn't a stretch to imagine her continuing to lean into Vanessa's narrative as time went on. What if this was just the start? What if the rest of my life was going to be spent as a footnote in Emily's story while Greg and Vanessa took center stage? I couldn't let that happen. That's when I made the decision to change my will. This was about protecting myself. If she wanted Greg to be the one she saw as her father, then fine. He could take on all the responsibilities that came with that role, even after I was gone. The next morning, I called my attorney and scheduled an appointment. When I got to his office, I told him I wanted to remove Emily as my beneficiary and instead leave everything to Charity and my sister Laura. My attorney raised an eyebrow but didn't say much. He asked a few questions, probably to make sure I wasn't acting out of pure anger, but I explained my reasoning. "She's chosen someone else to fill that role in her life," I said. "I'm just making it official." The process was straightforward, but I walked out of that office feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. On one hand, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. On the other hand, it was hard to let go of the vision I'd always had for the future, one where Emily and I were close, where I got to watch her grow into her life and family. I thought this decision would stay private for a long time, maybe even until after I was gone. But somehow, Emily found out within days. My guess is that Laura let it slip, though she swears she didn't. Either way, the phone call I got from Emily was anything but pleasant. "Dad, what the hell is this about you cutting me out of your will?" she said, not even bothering with a hello. I sighed, already bracing myself for the argument. "I think you already know why, Emily." "No, I don't," she snapped. "You're just doing this to punish me, aren't you?" "Not at all," I said calmly. "This isn't about punishment. It's about boundaries. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're being ridiculous. You're my father. Just because I included Greg doesn't mean you don't matter to me. Actions speak louder than words," I replied. "You didn't just include Greg. You chose him. You made it clear who you see as your father in the moments that matter most. And I'm respecting that choice by stepping back." Her voice started to shake, and I could tell she was getting emotional. "So that's it? You're just cutting me off entirely?" "No, let's call it something else," I said firmly. "I am just drawing a line. I've spent years putting you first, Emily, but I won't keep doing it if you don't value what I've done for you." She didn't say much after that. She said something about how unfair I was being and hung up. For the next few days, I kept expecting her to call back and try to talk things through, but the phone stayed silent. Instead, I started hearing from other family members, people who'd clearly gotten Vanessa's version of the story. Vanessa, of course, took the news and ran with it. She called Laura, telling her how cruel I was being and how much this was hurting Emily. She even told a few relatives that I'd disowned Emily completely. But here's the thing. I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing up for myself. I wasn't going to let Vanessa or anyone else dictate how I should feel or what I should do. A week or so later, I got one last call from Emily. This time she wasn't yelling, but her tone was colder than I'd ever heard before. I just want to know one thing, she said. Do you even care about me at all anymore? I felt my heart sink, but I stayed firm. Of course I care about you, Emily. I always will. But caring about you doesn't mean letting you treat me like I don't matter. You broke something between you and me that would take ages to be fixed, if ever. She didn't say much after that. She thanked me for being honest, in the most sarcastic tone imaginable, and hung up. Cutting ties wasn't easy. For weeks, I kept wondering if I'd done the right thing. But every time I thought about it, I came back to the same conclusion. I had to protect myself. If Emily couldn't see the value in what I'd done for her, then I wasn't going to keep pouring energy into a one-sided relationship. After that, I figured they'd move on with their lives, and I'd move on with mine. But what I didn't expect was for Vanessa's web of lies to start unraveling so quickly, or for it to happen in such a public way. It all started with my sister, Laura. She'd been biting her tongue for months, trying to stay neutral, but after seeing how Vanessa and Emily twisted the story, she'd had enough. James, she told me one afternoon, I've kept quiet for too long. Vanessa's been running her mouth about you to anyone who'll listen, and it's disgusting. People need to know the truth. Laura, it's not worth it, I said, not wanting her to get dragged into the drama. No, she said firmly. It is worth it. Vanessa's been smearing you for years, and Emily's buying into every word of it. If I don't say something, no one will. I didn't try to stop her. Honestly, part of me wanted the truth to come out. The turning point came at a family gathering at Laura's house. Vanessa wasn't there, thank God. But Emily showed up, and of course, she was all smiles, acting like nothing was wrong. Laura saw her and couldn't hold back anymore. So, Emily, Laura said loud enough for the room to hear, do you really believe all that nonsense your mom's been feeding you about why she left? Emily froze, clearly caught off guard. What are you talking about? I'm talking about your mom running around telling everyone that James was controlling and that's why she walked away, Laura said, her voice sharp. You think that's the truth? Emily looked uncomfortable. That's what Mom told me. Well, she's lying, Laura snapped. You want to know the real reason your mom left? It wasn't because of your dad. It was because she had an affair and got pregnant. She bailed because she didn't want to face the fallout. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Emily's face turned pale. That's not true, she said weakly. It's true, Laura said. Ask her. Ask Vanessa where she was for the first few years after she left. Ask her about the kid she had and gave up for adoption. Your dad stayed, raised you, and never said a word about it because he didn't want to ruin your image of her. And this is how you repay him? Emily didn't say anything. She just stood there, her mouth opening and closing, like she was trying to come up with a response. I wasn't there for this conversation, but Laura called me later to fill me in. I'm sorry, James, she said. I know it wasn't my place to say anything, but I couldn't take it anymore. Emily needed to hear the truth. Don't apologize, I told her. It's about time someone said it. The fallout was immediate. Emily confronted Vanessa, and of course, Vanessa denied everything at first. But the thing about lies is that they're hard to keep straight, especially when people start asking questions. Apparently, Greg overheard one of these arguments between Vanessa and Emily, and that's when things really started to fall apart. From what I heard, he'd had no idea about Vanessa's past. She'd painted herself as the victim for so long that even he believed her version of the story. Finding out she'd lied about something so big shook him to his core. You mean to tell me you had an affair and a child and never told me? Greg reportedly said during one of their blowouts. It's not like that, Vanessa yelled. That was years ago. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me, Greg shot back. You've been lying to me this whole time. How am I supposed to trust you now? Greg didn't stick around long after that. Word got out pretty quickly that he'd packed his things and left. Vanessa tried to spin it, of course, saying Greg couldn't handle the truth and was abandoning her. But by that point, people were starting to see through her act. Even Emily seemed to be questioning everything. She stopped calling or texting me, but Laura said she was clearly struggling with what she'd learned. She doesn't know what to believe anymore, Laura told me. Vanessa's lies are unraveling, and Emily's realizing how much of it she bought into. I wish I could say I felt vindicated, but honestly, it just made me sad. I didn't want Emily to suffer. I wanted her to see the truth before things got this messy. But sometimes, people have to hit rock bottom before they can start to rebuild. Vanessa, meanwhile, was in full damage control mode. She started reaching out to people, trying to spin the story in her favor. But the more she talked, the worse it got. People who'd once believed her started turning against her, seeing her for the manipulative person she was. It wasn't just family either. Vanessa's friends, people who'd stood by her for years, began distancing themselves. Nobody likes being lied to, and Vanessa had been lying for a long time. Emily hasn't reached out to me since everything went down, but I know she's heard the truth now. Whether or not she believes it is up to her, I'm not holding my breath for an apology or a reconciliation, but I hope she takes some time to really think about everything. I kept to myself for the next few weeks. I thought I was making progress until one day there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Emily standing there. She looked worn out, like she hadn't slept in days, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I reminded myself of everything that had happened. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my face neutral. "Emily, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to talk," she said, shifting nervously. "Please." I let out a long breath. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but another part, the part that still remembered rocking her to sleep as a baby, couldn't do it. "All right," I said, stepping aside. She sat on the couch, and I stayed standing, crossing my arms. "What's this about?" She looked down at her hands, clearly struggling to find the words. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About the wedding, about Mom, about how I treated you." I didn't say anything, just waited for her to continue. "I know I screwed up," she said, her voice trembling. "I let Mom get in my head, and I didn't stop to think about how much it was hurting you. I made you feel like you didn't matter, and that's the last thing I ever wanted." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't hit the way I think she thought they would. I'd waited so long to hear her admit the truth, but now that she was saying it, it didn't feel like enough. "Why now, Emily?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Why come here now, after everything?" She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "Because I'm sorry. I know I can't take back what I did, but I want to make it right. I want to fix this." I let out a bitter laugh. "Fix this? Emily, this isn't something you can just fix. You didn't just hurt me. You replaced me. You made it clear that Greg and Vanessa were your priority. And now that it's all fallen apart, you want to come back and pick up where we left off?" "That's not what I'm saying," she said, her voice cracking. I miss you, Dad. I miss us." I shook my head, feeling more exhausted than angry. "Emily, I spent 26 years putting you first. I gave you everything I had, and when it came time for you to show me even a fraction of that loyalty, you chose them. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" She didn't answer, just wiped at her face as the tears started falling. "I'm glad you're starting to see the truth about Vanessa," I continued. "But this isn't just about her lies. This is about trust, Emily, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Her shoulders slumped, and she looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch. "So, that's it?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know what the future holds, Emily, but right now, I need space, I need time to heal, and I can't do that with you in my life." She sat there for a moment, like she was trying to figure out if she should argue or just accept it. Eventually, she nodded. "I understand," she whispered. I walked her to the door, and as she stepped outside, she turned back to me. "I really am sorry, Dad. I hope one day you can forgive me." I didn't say anything, just gave her a small nod before closing the door. Vanessa, meanwhile, was still dealing with her own fallout. Word got around that Greg had filed for divorce, and most of the family had distanced themselves from her. She was on her own, and honestly, I didn't care. She made her bed. I'm not saying it's been easy. There are still days when I miss the way things used to be with Emily, before Vanessa came back and turned everything upside down. But I've learned that sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from the people who hurt you, even if they're family. Maybe one day Emily and I will find a way back to each other. But for now, I'm at peace with my decision. I've spent enough of my life giving to people who didn't value me. It's time to put myself first.
The female manager said the useless, low-educated people are a nuisance. My grandson was standing alone, looking lonely in the hallway of the company at night when I visited for an errand. When I asked him what was wrong, he told me with a voice full of frustration and sadness. My grandson is still a newbie at this company, but he's not someone who deserves to be treated this badly. I see. So I decided to make an angry call to the female manager. When she reluctantly answered, I asked her what she meant. She sighed over the phone and replied, "It means exactly what it says. He's a useless, low-educated person who can't do his job." At that moment, I felt something inside me snap that I had been holding back. "You're getting transferred to China tomorrow." "What?" And so, I delivered merciless retribution to this foolish female manager. My name is James Davis. I'm a busy man in my early 60s, running a video music software company called Scat 8 Force in New York City. At 63, Society would call me a senior, and I've had moments where I felt my age. Just the other day, my grandson Joseph graduated from college and finally entered the workforce. The same grandson who used to call me Grandpa, Grandpa, and cling to me as a child is now a working adult. To my surprise, Joseph's new job is at none other than Scat 8 Force. I'm working at the same company as you, Grandpa, doing something I love. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, you've grown up, but to think you joined Scat 8 Force, just like me. I was very surprised when Joseph told me directly about his job. So I asked him, Joseph, if you decided this on your own, I have nothing to say, but why didn't you consult me before you got the job? I could have helped you. I thought if I told you, you'd talk to HR or something to get me in. I wanted to get in on my own strength, without relying on your power, Grandpa. Joseph's firm answer hit a sore spot for me. I wanted to say I wouldn't do that, but I couldn't fully deny it. Even as an adult, I have often spoiled Joseph out of my love for him. So, knowing he wanted to join Scat 8 Force, even a branch, I might have intervened secretly. Joseph predicted and feared my overprotectiveness. You're right, it's embarrassing to be looked after by my grandson like this. Don't apologize. I'm grateful that you care about me, Grandpa. Thank you. Joseph smiled at me while gently patting my shoulder. Seeing my grandson, who has grown so strong and kind, truly made my eyes well up with tears. To think I'd almost cry over his growth. I really am getting old. These days, I feel the quick passage of time, but I have no intention of retiring just yet. I have a loving family, including Joseph, and colleagues who share my passion for music. So, no matter how busy or tough it gets, I can't give up. No matter what happens, I will continue this work for as long as I can for the sake of my loved ones and my own dreams. Just as I vowed this to myself, a dark cloud suddenly loomed over my days. This happened before Joseph joined as a new employee. I saw it when I passed by the office where the employees were working. Oh, not again. This is a real problem. I sighed at the familiar scene and headed to the office. As soon as I entered, I heard the familiar angry voice of a woman echoing through the room. More, Johnson, get it together. I told you to meet your sales targets already. Seriously, useless low-educated people are such a hassle. That high-pitched, nervous woman's angry voice had become all too familiar. Suppressing the urge to feel sick, I looked in the direction of the voice. There, a beautiful but stubborn and demanding woman in a suit was yelling at two young employees in their late 20s. I recognized the woman shouting at the two employees. Her name is Mary Smith. She's the sales manager and certainly capable, but her personality is terrible. To put it bluntly, she's the worst and extremely harsh with her subordinates. She particularly despises those with average or low educational backgrounds, such as high school or community college graduates, and relentlessly pressures them. If you don't meet your sales targets by the end of this month, you're not just getting a pay cut, you're getting fired. Work like your life depends on it. Yes, I'm sorry. We'll do our best. Please don't fire us. The two young employees were clearly terrified of Mary. They were being yelled at in front of the other employees in the office, whose expressions were equally dark and heavy. Hey, look at Manager Mary. She's at it again. I wish she'd give us a break. Does she do that knowing we're all here? Her attitude is just awful, seriously. Hearing such murmurs more than once or twice, the atmosphere at the company is always terrible because of Mary. Hey Mary, what are you doing today? Look around you. Trying to stop this situation, I step in to confront Mary. By the way, this isn't the first or second time. When I try to stop her, Mary turns around with a sickeningly fake smile and sidles up to me. Oh, President Davis, I'm so sorry for causing trouble as usual. Don't try to cover it up with a fake smile. You pushed a new employee into taking sick leave with depression the other day. This is no joke. You're going too far. Well, it's tough when all my subordinates are such low-educated, useless people. But thanks to your guidance, President Davis, we're managing somehow. Mary dismisses my warnings with her laughter and persistence. I'm taken aback by her behavior, and the employees look at her with disdain and disgust. Mary is blatantly obsequious to higher-ups, so she has no respect from her subordinates. Whenever she causes trouble like this, I call her to a private place and sternly reprimand her. Cut it out, Mary. How many times do I have to tell you? With your methods, no one will follow you in this day and age. I keep telling you too. I'm being strict for the sake of this company. And with those high school and community college grads being so useless, I have to be tough on them. I'm telling you, that's the wrong mindset. Because of your constant pressure on the employees, sales performance is dropping, and the turnover rate is increasing. I'll say it as many times as it takes. You're too soft, President. If you think you can run a company with such a saintly attitude, you're mistaken. If there's ever been a perfect example of someone who is full of excuses, it's Mary. Whenever she's severely reprimanded by me or other executives, Mary uses the excuse of for the company to withstand it all. The real trouble is, there are several executives who highly value Mary's abilities. Manager Mary has exceptional skills, second only to us. It's ridiculous to think of punishing her for such minor issues. Absolutely, without her, Scat 8 Force wouldn't be what it is today. The ones who should be punished are the incompetent employees. These executives always vehemently oppose any severe disciplinary action against Mary. Mary possesses comparable abilities and influence, and it's no exaggeration to say the company can't function without them. Because of this, despite numerous attempts by me and the other executives to take a firm stance, we've repeatedly failed due to the interference of these executives. This stalemate has persisted for 2 or 3 years, and during this time, my grandson Joseph joined the company. To make matters worse, Joseph was assigned to the sales. Grandpa, I know you're worried, but I'm officially joining the working world this year. I'll be careful not to overdo it. Since Joseph compromised, I decided not to press the matter further. Joseph is in his late 20s, a mature and responsible adult, so I figured he could handle a bit of harassment from Mary. With that in mind, I planned to monitor the situation and consider my next steps regarding Mary. However, I later regretted my decision. One night, I realized I had forgotten some documents needed for an upcoming meeting, so I rushed back to the office. On my way to the president's office, near the hallway by the vending machines, I saw something that made me stop. Wait, is that Joseph? Oh, Grandpa. Joseph was standing there alone. He held an unopened can of juice in one hand, bought from the nearby vending machine, looking completely dejected. I was shocked to see that the energy and spirit he had when he first joined the company were gone. What happened, Joseph? Why are you here alone at this hour? What's going on? Grandpa, it's nothing serious. I've just been a bit tired from work. I'll head home soon, so don't worry. You don't look fine. You've seemed down both here and at home, and you haven't been responding to my messages or calls. I'm sorry about that, but really, I'm fine. Don't worry about me, Grandpa. Just focus on your own work. Joseph was trying to keep me, his grandfather and the company president, from worrying, stubbornly keeping his mouth shut. But I couldn't just stand by, so I persisted in asking him, even if it meant he might get annoyed with me. Eventually, Joseph relented, his expression darkening as he began to speak. The female manager said the useless, low-educated people are a nuisance. What? The female manager? You mean Mary? What did she do? Manager Mary gave me an unfair lecture in front of everyone and told me I was a nuisance and should leave the company. Joseph, anguished, had tears rolling down his cheeks. He then started to tell me about the mistreatment he received from Mary. That day, after returning from an outside task, Joseph was subjected to a harsh lecture in front of his colleagues. How could you forget to buy the special lunch I asked for on your way back? Forgetting your superior's lunch shows a lack of responsibility as an employee. I'm sorry, but Manager Mary, you emailed me just before I returned to the office, and I couldn't respond in time. Don't make excuses. I am your superior. You must follow my orders, no matter the circumstances. Can you really do your job here if you can't manage that? Forgetting to buy her lunch, Mary erupted in anger and berated Joseph with unreasonable scolding. Moreover, she continued to lecture him in front of his colleagues for a whole hour. While Joseph's colleagues looked unusually uncomfortable and tense, Mary dismissively told him to step back and then said, "Oh, I almost forgot in my anger over missing my precious lunch. You're fired as of today." What? Mary's announcement shocked not only Joseph but also his colleagues. Joseph naturally protested. Wait a minute. Why am I being fired? Besides, Manager Mary doesn't have that authority. You're an employee in this department, and I'm the manager in charge of this department. Therefore, I have the authority to fire you. I've never heard of such a thing, and firing me just for forgetting your lunch is completely unreasonable. Unreasonable? That's unexpected. I was giving you a final warning as your former superior, you useless, low-educated burden. Mary's mocking laughter enraged Joseph's colleagues, who all protested vehemently. However, Mary remained arrogant and defiant, stating that if anyone had complaints, they would be fired alongside Joseph, leaving the atmosphere in the office worse than ever. I see. Hearing everything from Joseph, my chest was filled with disbelief. I couldn't believe Mary could be such a terrible person. I regretted not taking action earlier, even at the risk of potential consequences, to prevent this from happening to my grandson. I immediately called Mary. However, she showed no sign of answering. I didn't give up and kept calling persistently, almost like a stalker, until she finally answered. What do you want, President Davis? I'm on my way home on the train. If you need to talk, can it wait until I'm back at the office? Hearing her annoyed voice, I struggled to keep my anger in check. I'm sorry to bother you when you're tired, but I spoke with my grandson today, and that's why I'm calling. What? Your grandson talked to you? What did he say? Did he fill your head with lies out of spite or jealousy? Mary's disrespectful tone, despite talking to me, the company president, made my blood boil. Her arrogance and condescension were infuriating. But I maintained my composure. I heard you reprimanded Joseph for an hour in front of everyone because he forgot to buy your lunch, and then you fired him. How do you explain that? Explain. Your grandson is utterly incompetent and lacks the responsibility expected of an employee here. I did what was necessary. What was necessary? Do you really think such punishment is warranted for merely forgetting to buy lunch? This goes beyond a simple reprimand. What are you implying? Are you saying I should take back the termination because he's your grandson? Maintaining her arrogant attitude, I raised my voice slightly and spoke sternly over the phone. Of course not. I'm a company executive. I wouldn't do that. But Mary, as I've told you many times, no one will follow your methods. President, how many times do I have to tell you, in today's world, the saintly approach doesn't work. In the end, it's education and competence that matter. So, you called Joseph a useless, low-educated person. What's your reasoning? Explain in 40 words or less. It means exactly what it says. He's a useless, low-educated person who can't do his job. Mary laughed, mocking Joseph through me. I looked at his resume. Your grandson graduated from a third-rate music college in the city. Why hire such a low-educated nobody? What did you say? There are many more from third-rate colleges, and several employees with only high school diplomas. Only a handful of us are elite graduates from prestigious universities. It's disgraceful. Her words insulted many employees, including Joseph and Dorothy. Unaware of my rising anger, Mary delivered her final blow. If you understand, Then start by getting rid of your grandson and the current employees and replace them with elites. That's what's best for the company. Those words snapped something inside me. I see. So that's how you think. Understand. Oh, you understand. Then let's start making the changes to improve this company. Yes, as part of that reform, you're being transferred to China tomorrow. What? Mary, who had been on the verge of gloating, sounded utterly shocked. We'll also need to discuss other disciplinary measures, so stay tuned. Wait a minute. Disciplinary measures, and I'm being transferred. What do you mean? Mary was yelling something on the other end of the line, but I ignored her, hung up, and temporarily blocked her phone and email. I then gently patted Joseph on both shoulders and spoke to him. It's okay, Joseph. You don't need to worry about anything. I'll make sure the termination is reversed, and I'll handle Manager Mary as well. Grandpa, you did nothing wrong. Leave everything to me. Got it? Looking straight into his tear-filled eyes, I said, and Joseph, though initially taken aback, nodded in agreement. The next day, the bad feeling I had when Joseph first told me everything came true. The sales department employees, Joseph's colleagues, all stormed into my office. What? What's going on? Why do you all look so frantic? All of them wore expressions of anger and sadness, and they were holding resignation letters. I was shocked by the scene as Joseph's colleagues thrust their resignation letters at me and began to speak. President Davis, we've had enough of Mary's tyranny. We can't follow her anymore. Fire her immediately or take severe action against her. If not, we will all resign from this company. They could no longer tolerate Mary's tyranny disguised as strictness. The incident with Joseph seemed to have been the last straw, causing their pent-up frustration and anger to explode into this collective action. No matter the reasons or circumstances, I felt responsible for allowing things to reach this point. As I tried to calm them down, a woman who seemed to be their leader stepped forward. President, I mean no disrespect, but how long do you intend to let Mary run wild, your grandson? Joseph has also been horribly treated. I recognized her, Dorothy Anderson. At 28, she's still young but a natural leader among the sales department employees. Glamorous and beautiful, yet strong-willed and assertive, she always speaks her mind. Despite being repeatedly crushed by Mary's tyranny, Dorothy has never given up, continuously seeking discussions and voicing her opinions. Recently, I was surprised to hear that Dorothy, who has been a good mentor to Joseph, had quickly become his girlfriend. I can't stand it anymore, and I'm not going to stay silent and accept this. This time, please give Mary the severe punishment she deserves. The frustration and sadness she felt from seeing Joseph treated so unfairly were evident in her words and expression. This made me regret even more deeply that I had let Mary's behavior go unchecked for so long. I understand how you all feel. It's my fault for being too lenient because of her abilities. President Davis, I promise I will deal with Mary and make things right for all of you and Joseph. Please hold on to your resignation letters. Trust me. As I pleaded, Dorothy and the other colleagues looked at each other and then nodded in agreement. Understand, it feels disrespectful to ask, but for the sake of us and Joseph, please handle Manager Mary appropriately. Of course, if there's anything you need from me to resolve this, just let me know. I will give this matter my full attention. After discussing with Dorothy and the others, we formulated a plan to deal with Mary, and I sent them home. I then unblocked Mary and called her again. Finally, I got through, President Davis. What was that about yesterday? Sorry to keep you waiting. I've reached a decision regarding your punishment first. I took a deep breath and began to explain the disciplinary actions I would take against Mary. You will pay compensation to Joseph and the others in one lump sum, not installments. I can't risk you defaulting on it. Wait a minute. Why am I being transferred and compensation? What did I do? Mary, horrified by the beginning of her punishment, started to protest loudly. Think about it. Do you realize how many employees you've driven to take leave or resign with your tyrannical behavior? You should be getting a disciplinary dismissal. Disciplinary dismissal? You must be joking. Why should I be treated like this? I've been strict for the sake of the company. Feeling cornered, Mary tried to use her usual defense, but I wasn't having it. For the sake of the company? Don't make me laugh. You're incompetent. Incompetent? Me? Incompetent? Who do you think you're talking to? Mary was infuriated. She always bragged about being an elite and a prestigious university graduate, so this provocation hit her hard. As she responded angrily, I stood my ground. Who else would I be talking to? Obviously, you. What? You're drunk on your position and power, causing chaos in the company. Do you know what happened to the turnover rate of young, new, and temporary employees since you became sales manager? What are you trying to say? I was just tricked her into telling the truth, but Mary seemed to have something in mind as she clearly began to panic. Taking advantage of her unease, I pressed on. Since you became sales manager, the turnover rate has risen to 40% over the past 2 to 3 years, mainly among employees in your department. What? 40%? That high? Mary's voice was stunned. I thought it was frightening she hadn't even noticed. Our investigation revealed that Mary's so-called strictness for the company's sake was the main cause of this high turnover rate due to her malicious and unreasonable behavior. Despite our attempts to address it, we were always thwarted by executives who valued her skills too much. However, after seeing Joseph's tears and hearing Dorothy and the others' pleas, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Oh, and when we looked into the executives who supported you, we found some interesting facts. It turns out you had inappropriate relationships with them, didn't you? What are you talking about? That's impossible. Also, we found out that you used similar tactics to climb the ladder to become the sales manager and to secure your job. You're nothing but a paper tiger. As I revealed these shocking truths from my investigation, Mary's voice trembled over the phone. She was either caught off.
I'm Catherine, and I grew up in what you might call a big family. Dad was hell-bent on having a son. So, they kept trying, over and over. Mom got pregnant again and again until the doctors finally put their foot down. No more, they said. It's too risky. That's when Mom and Dad finally threw in the towel on their dream of a boy. Being the oldest, I got stuck with a lot of the grunt work. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sisters, but sometimes it felt like I was more of a parent than a sibling. I had to grow up fast, you know? While other kids were out playing, I was changing diapers, doing laundry, and helping Mom with everything around the house. Things really changed when my youngest sister was born. It was like Mom and Dad suddenly remembered they were parents. They showered her with attention, bought her the best toys, signed her up for every club and activity under the sun. Whatever she wanted, she got. One day, when I was about 14, I overheard Mom talking on the phone. I just don't have time for the older girls anymore, she said. Catherine's handling it, though. She's such a good helper. Helper, that's what I was reduced to. Not a daughter, not even a sister, just a helper. But I had a secret that kept me going. My grandmother, Mom's mother. They'd had some big falling out years ago and hadn't spoken since. But I'd managed to find her number, and we'd been talking in secret. As I got older, I started to dream about college. I wanted more for myself than just being the family babysitter. But when I graduated high school, Mom and Dad dropped a bombshell on me. There's no money for your education, Catherine, Dad said, not even looking me in the eye. You need to get a job and help out financially. We need to save for your sister's education. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling trapped and hopeless. But then I remembered my secret weapon, Grandma. The next day, I called her, spilling out everything between sobs. Don't you worry, sweetheart, she said, her voice firm and determined. I'll pay for your college. You deserve a chance at a better life. And just like that, a whole new world opened up for me. I applied to colleges in other cities, dreaming of a fresh start. When I got accepted to study economics, I was over the moon. But my parents, they didn't see it that way. "You're abandoning your family," Mom accused, her eyes cold. "After everything we've done for you." Done for me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I've been raising your kids since I was a kid myself." "Get out," Dad said, his voice low and angry. "If you're going, then go. But don't expect any support from us." I packed my bags that night, my sisters watching with tear-filled eyes. "Don't go, Kathy," they pleaded. "I have to," I told them, hugging each one tight. "But I'll always be here for you. Always." As I walked out the door, I heard Dad's voice behind me. "Girls, you are not to have any contact with Catherine. Do you understand?" As I settled into college life, I felt like I could finally breathe. The campus was bustling with energy, and for once, I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. But even as I embraced this new chapter, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. I missed my sisters fiercely. Despite my parents' ban, I couldn't bear the thought of completely cutting ties with them. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. My heart raced as I answered. "Kathy?" It was my second youngest sister's voice, barely above a whisper. "Emily? Is that you?" I could hardly contain my excitement. "Yeah, it's me. I'm using my friend's phone. Mom and Dad can't know." We talked for hours that night, catching up on everything. Emily told me how things had changed at home, how our parents were even stricter now, and how much they all missed me. "Even Sarah?" I asked, referring to our youngest sister. There was a pause on the other end. "Sarah, she's different, Kathy. She told Mom and Dad about us calling you. They took our phones away, but don't worry, we'll find ways to keep in touch. We love you, Kathy." Those secret calls became my lifeline. My sisters, except for Sarah, would use their friends' phones to reach out to me. We'd talk about their lives, their dreams, and I'd share stories about college. It wasn't the same as being there, but it was something. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my studies. Economics fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in my classes. My professors took notice, and soon I was being recommended for internships and special projects. As my college years flew by, I couldn't help but think about my family back home. I'd hear snippets from my sisters about how Sarah was still the golden child, how she was in all these clubs and always the center of attention. Mom and Dad are talking about sending her to some fancy private school, my sister Jessica told me during one of our secret calls. "What about you and Emily?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Oh, you know," Jessica said, trying to sound nonchalant. "We'll probably just go to the local high school. It's fine, really." But I knew it wasn't fine. I knew how it felt to be overlooked, to be treated like you didn't matter as much. It broke my heart that my sisters were going through the same thing. As graduation approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I'd done well in college, thanks in no small part to my grandmother's support. She'd been my rock through it all, always there with a kind word or a bit of advice when I needed it. "I'm so proud of you, Catherine," she told me over the phone one night. "You've overcome so much. Your grandfather would have been proud too." The day of my graduation, I scanned the crowd, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents and sisters would be there. But they weren't. The only familiar face in the sea of people was my grandmother's, beaming with pride. Fresh out of college, I hit the ground running. The job was challenging, but I thrived on it. Months flew by, and I settled into a routine. Work, gym, home, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was mine. I was building my own life, on my own terms. Then came the company's annual corporate party. I almost didn't go, large gatherings still made me a bit uncomfortable. But my colleague, Jen, insisted. "Come on, Catherine," she pleaded. "It'll be fun. Plus, I heard some bigwigs from our partner companies will be there. Great networking opportunity." The party was in full swing when I arrived. Soft jazz played in the background as people mingled, drinks in hand. I was about to make a beeline for the punch bowl when I quite literally bumped into someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I stammered, looking up to see a pair of kind brown eyes. "No harm done," the man said with a warm smile. "I'm Michael, by the way. I don't think we've met." "Catherine," I replied, shaking his hand. "I'm from the economics department." We got to talking, and I learned that Michael was an executive from one of our partner companies. He was smart, funny, and easy to talk to. Before I knew it, hours had passed. As the party wound down, Michael asked for my number. "I'd love to continue this conversation over coffee sometime," he said. I hesitated for a moment, then thought, why not? I'd spent so much of my life taking care of others. Maybe it was time to let someone take care of me for a change. Our first date turned into a second, then a third. Before I knew it, we were officially a couple. Michael was everything I'd never known I wanted: kind, supportive, and he actually listened when I talked. A year later, he proposed to me. As we started planning the wedding, I faced a dilemma. Should I invite my family? Despite everything, they were still my parents, my sisters. After much thought, I sent the invitations. To my parents, to all my sisters, even Sarah. I also sent one to my grandmother, the one person who had always been there for me. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing from my parents or sisters. Then, one day, I got a call from Emily. "Kathy," she said, her voice trembling. "We got your invitation. Mom and Dad, they won't let us come. They won't even let us send you a card. I'm so sorry." The day of the wedding arrived. As I stood in front of the mirror in my white dress, I felt a mix of joy and sadness. My grandmother walked in, her eyes shining with tears. "Oh, Catherine," she said, hugging me tight. "You look beautiful. I'm so proud of you." As I walked down the aisle towards Michael, I saw the faces of our friends, his family, and my grandmother. My family wasn't there, but I realized something important: family isn't always about blood. It's about love, support, and acceptance. The years after our wedding flew by in a whirlwind of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Michael and I settled into our life together, both of us continuing to work and build our careers. We traveled, we explored new hobbies together, and we talked endlessly about our future. And then we decided to start trying for a baby. Months passed, then a year, then two. Nothing happened. We went through all the tests, tried every recommendation, but still, no baby. It was heartbreaking. The next few years were a roller coaster of hope and disappointment. We went through treatment after treatment, each failure hitting us harder than the last. One day, after another failed round of IVF, I broke down. "Maybe we're not meant to be parents," I sobbed into Michael's chest. He held me tight, stroking my hair. "Hey, look at me," he said gently. "We're going to be parents. Maybe not in the way we originally thought, but we will be. What do you think about adoption? A child is a child, Catherine. All they need is love, and we've got plenty of that." His words warmed my heart, and I felt a glimmer of hope. "Okay," I said, wiping my tears. "Let's do it. Let's adopt." The adoption process was long and often frustrating. There were so many forms to fill out, interviews to go through, home studies to pass. But we persevered, driven by our desire to give a child a loving home. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the call. The day we met Lily was one I'll never forget. She was tiny, with big brown eyes and skin darker than ours. She looked scared and confused, clinging to her social worker's hand. I knelt down to her level. "Hi, Lily," I said softly. "I'm Catherine, and this is Michael. We've been waiting a long time to meet you." She looked at us warily, then back at her social worker, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, Lily reached out and took my hand. In that moment, I fell in love. This was our daughter. I didn't care that she didn't look like us or share our DNA. She was ours, and we were hers. When Lily was about 5, we sat her down and explained, in simple terms, how she came to be our daughter. We showed her pictures from the day we met her, told her how much we'd wanted her, how we'd fallen in love with her the moment we saw her. Lily listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When we finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So, you picked me?" she asked finally. I smiled, tears in my eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Out of all the children in the world, we picked you. And we'd pick you again every single time." She beamed at us, then threw her arms around us both. "I love you, Mommy and Daddy," she said. As I held my daughter close, I thought about my own childhood. The pain, the neglect, the feeling of never being good enough. I vowed then and there that Lily would never feel that way. She would always know how loved and wanted she was. Life has a funny way of bringing you full circle. One day, Michael said his company had opened a branch in my hometown. And he will become the head of this branch. The move was chaotic, as moves tend to be. But as we settled into our new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to reach out to my sisters. My parents had passed away a few years back. I hadn't gone to the funeral. But my sisters, maybe it was time to mend those fences. I reached out to Jessica and Emily first. They were cautious at first, but eager to reconnect. We met for coffee, and it was like no time had passed at all. They cooed over pictures of Lily, told me about their own families, their kids. "We've missed you so much, Kathy," Emily said, squeezing my hand. "We're so glad you're back." For a while, everything was perfect. We started having family gatherings, holiday celebrations. Lily was thrilled to have cousins to play with, and I loved seeing her surrounded by family. But then there was Sarah, our youngest sister. From the moment we reconnected, I could tell she hadn't changed much. She was still the spoiled, entitled girl she'd always been, now grown into a woman who thought the world revolved around her and her family. At our first big family gathering, Sarah showed up with her husband and their son, Tommy. From the moment they arrived, it was clear that Sarah saw this as a competition rather than a reunion. "Tommy, show your aunties how well you can sing," she'd say, pushing her son forward. "He's taking lessons, you know. The teacher says he's a prodigy." As the party went on, I noticed Lily hanging back, looking uncomfortable. She approached Tommy, holding out a piece of candy. "Want to share?" she asked shyly. Before Tommy could respond, Sarah swooped in. "Tommy, don't take that," she screeched. "Throw it away. Her hands are dirty." I was across the room in an instant. "Sarah, what are you talking about? Lily's hands are clean." But Sarah just glared at me, then at Lily. "Well, you never know with her kind," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Come on, Tommy. Let's go play with your real cousins." I stood there, shocked and hurt. Did she really just say that? About my daughter? From that moment on, things were tense. Sarah made it clear at every gathering that she didn't consider Lily part of the family. She'd loudly proclaim that Tommy couldn't play with Lily because who knows what diseases she might have, or we don't know her genetic background. Each time, I'd confront her, defend my daughter. But the damage was being done. I could see Lily withdrawing, becoming quieter at these family events. One day, I made a decision. I wouldn't force Lily to attend these gatherings anymore. I started declining invitations, making excuses. Jessica and Emily understood, even though they were disappointed. As the dust settled from our move and the family drama that ensued, I found solace in my visits to Grandma. She had been my rock through everything, and now, in her twilight years, I wanted to be there for her as much as she had been for me. Every weekend, Lily and I would make the short drive to Grandma's house. She would be waiting on the porch, her face lighting up as soon as she saw us. "There's my girls," she'd call out, arms outstretched. Lily would race up the steps, throwing herself into Grandma's embrace. "Grandma, I missed you." Watching them together always warmed my heart. Grandma doted on Lily, showering her with love and attention. She never once treated Lily differently because she was adopted. To Grandma, Lily was family, plain and simple. As the months passed, Grandma's health began to decline. Our visits became less about long talks and more about quiet companionship. Lily would read to her, or show her drawings she'd made. Even in her weakened state, Grandma's love for us shone through. The day Grandma passed was one of the hardest of my life. We'd been there with her at the end, holding her hand as she slipped away peacefully. Lily, wise beyond her years, had climbed onto the bed and curled up next to her great-grandmother. "It's okay, Grandma," she'd whispered. "You can rest now. We love you." In the days that followed, as we dealt with our grief and the logistics that come with losing a loved one, we received some unexpected news. Grandma's lawyer called, asking us to come to his office. "Your grandmother left a will," he explained when we arrived. "And, well, you might want to sit down for this." What he told us next left me speechless. Grandma had left everything to me and Lily. The house, several cars, and over $1 million. "Your grandfather was quite successful," the lawyer explained. "And your grandmother was an astute investor. She had intended to leave it all to your mother, despite their estrangement. But when your mother passed..." I nodded, understanding. Grandma had changed her will, leaving everything to us. When word got out about the inheritance, my phone started ringing off the hook. Jessica and Emily called to congratulate me, saying I deserved it. But then came the call I'd been dreading. "Sarah." "Catherine," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "I heard about Grandma's will. So, when are you sharing the inheritance with the rest of us?" I felt a flash of anger. After everything she'd said and done, how dare she? "I'm not," I said firmly. "The inheritance is for me and Lily. That's what Grandma wanted." "But that's not fair," Sarah screeched. "I'm family too. I deserve..." I cut her off. "No, Sarah, you don't. Goodbye." And I hung up. As I put down the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For so long, I'd tried to please everyone, to be the perfect daughter and sister. But now, I realized it was time to put my own family first. It was Jessica's birthday, and despite my reservations, I decided it was time to make an appearance at a family gathering. When we arrived, the party was in full swing. Jessica's backyard was filled with laughter and chatter. Kids ran around playing tag while adults mingled, drinks in hand. For a moment, it felt like old times. Jessica embraced me warmly. "I'm so glad you came, Kathy," she whispered. I could see the genuine happiness in her eyes. For the first hour or so, everything was fine. Lily joined her cousins on the lawn, their laughter floating across the yard. I relaxed a bit, thinking maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. But then I saw Sarah. She was moving from child to child, whispering in their ears. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw the way the kids' eyes widened, the way they glanced at Lily. Suddenly, Lily was standing alone. The other children had moved away, forming their own group, pointedly excluding her. I watched as my daughter's face crumpled in confusion and hurt. Before I could react, Lily ran to me, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy," she sobbed, "they don't want to play with me anymore. They said I'm sick and not really family." Rage boiled up inside me. I hugged Lily close, then marched over to Sarah, who was watching the scene with a smug smile. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Sarah's smile didn't falter. "Oh, calm down, Catherine. I'm just telling the children the truth. They deserve to know about her condition." "Condition?" I spat. "The only person with a condition here is you, Sarah. Your behavior is disgusting." By now, we'd drawn a crowd. The other adults were watching, wide-eyed, as the confrontation unfolded. Sarah's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "My behavior? That's rich coming from you, Catherine. You, who shamelessly took Grandma's money, robbing the rest of us of our rightful inheritance. And for what? To give money to that girl who isn't even really part of this family? Gasps echoed around us. How dare you, I seethed. Lily is my daughter. She is as much a part of this family as anyone else. Sarah laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. Family? She's not even related to us. She's just some random kid you picked up, probably born to drug addicts or criminals. She has no right to our family's legacy. I was shaking with fury now. You don't know anything about Lily or her birth parents. And it doesn't matter. She is my daughter, and I love her more than anything in this world. Love? Sarah sneered. Is that what you call it when you use a child to steal from your own family? Face it, Catherine. You're nothing but a thief, using that girl to get Grandma's money. Well, we won't stand for it anymore. It's time you shared what rightfully belongs to all of us. I was about to respond when Jessica stepped forward, her face set in determination. That's enough, Sarah, she said firmly. You have no right to speak to Catherine like that, or to treat Lily this way. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. What, you're taking her side? Emily joined Jessica, standing beside me. We both are. Catherine has always been there for us, even when our own parents weren't. She raised us, Sarah. She deserves every penny of that inheritance. I felt a lump form in my throat, touched by my sister's support. Sarah's face contorted with rage. You traitors, how dare you? You're betraying the memory of our parents. Emily scoffed. Our parents? The same parents who neglected us and showered you with attention? The same parents who cut Catherine off for daring to want an education? Jessica nodded. And let's not forget, Sarah, how you took Mom and Dad's house and all their savings after they died. You didn't share a cent of that with any of us. I gasped, this information new to me. What? Is that true, Sarah? Sarah's face paled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. It's true, Emily confirmed. She got everything when Mom and Dad passed, and she never once offered to share. A wave of disappointment and anger washed over me. All this time, Sarah had been accusing me of theft when she'd done the very same thing. Sarah, I said, my voice steady and firm. I think it's time for you to leave. You can't make me, she started, but Jessica cut her off. Yes, she can. This is my house, and I want you to go. We're all tired of your tantrums and your cruelty. Until you can treat Catherine and Lily with respect, you're not welcome here. Sarah looked around, realizing she was outnumbered. With a final glare, she grabbed her son's hand and stormed off. As the gate slammed behind her, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I turned to my sisters, tears in my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. Later that night, I made a decision. The next day, I called my sisters and told them my plan. Despite their protests that I didn't need to do this, I insisted. I gave them the house and the cars, keeping the $1 million for our family. With the inheritance settled, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I transferred half of the money to a trust fund for Lily's future, ensuring she would always be taken care of. The other half, Michael and I decided to use for our family. We'd take that trip to Disney World that Lily had been dreaming of. We'd renovate our home, creating the perfect space for our little family. And maybe, just maybe, we'd look into adopting another child, giving Lily the sibling she'd always wanted. I'm Anna, the afterthought in a family of geniuses. My parents, both big shots at the university, had their lives all mapped out. Then I showed up, uninvited and unexpected. We found out too late, Mom would often say, her voice thick with regret. By the time we knew, it was already too late for other options. My sister Sarah and I were born just 11 months apart. We looked like twins, but that's where the similarities ended. She was the brain, I was the heart. From day one, it was clear who the favorite was. Look, John. Sarah's reading already, Mom exclaimed one day when I was about 3. Sarah sat in the corner, nose buried in a book meant for kids twice her age. That pretty much set the tone for our childhood. Sarah devoured books, I devoured life. She memorized complex texts, I struggled to remember what I had for breakfast. I was diligent, hardworking. But no matter how hard I worked, it never seemed to be enough. Anna, Mom said one day, exasperation clear in her voice, how many times do I have to explain this? It's simple addition. I stared at the numbers, willing them to make sense. But they danced across the page, mocking me. Meanwhile, Sarah breezed through her advanced math homework in the next room. But where I lacked in academics, I made up for in personality. I was the class clown, the life of the party. My laughter was infectious, to everyone except my parents. One evening at dinner, I was telling a joke I'd heard at school. And then the chicken said, "Anna," Mom's sharp voice cut through my story. "Enough. Laughing for no reason is a sign of low intelligence. Please control yourself." I felt my cheeks burn with shame. Across the table, Sarah smirked, her eyes never leaving her book on quantum physics. As elementary school progressed, the divide only deepened. Sarah collected academic awards like they were going out of style. Me? I was lucky if I got a gold star for attendance. I'll never forget the day of the school science fair in 5th grade. Sarah's project on cellular mitosis won first place. Mine, well, let's just say my baking soda volcano didn't exactly erupt as planned. As we drove home, the car filled with praise for Sarah's achievement. I sat in the back, covered in dried baking soda, feeling smaller by the minute. "Well," Dad finally said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror, "I suppose not everyone in the family can be scientifically inclined." Mom nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's clear Anna doesn't have the aptitude for it. What will our colleagues think?" I sank lower in my seat, wishing I could disappear. That was the moment I realized I'd never be able to maintain their precious status in the scientific community. In their eyes, I was the disappointment, the one who couldn't carry on their legacy. As we got older, the gap between Sarah and me only widened. Sarah was whisked off to science camps, math competitions, and academic decathlons. Me? I was left with our elderly babysitter, Mrs. Jenkins. But you know what? Mrs. Jenkins was a godsend. While my parents were grooming Sarah to be the next Einstein, Mrs. Jenkins was teaching me skills that would serve me well in the real world. "Come on, Anna," she'd say, her wrinkled hands guiding mine as we kneaded dough. "Let me show you how to make a pie that'll knock their socks off." Other days, we'd clip coupons and plan grocery lists. "Listen here, girl," she'd say, her eyes twinkling. "Knowing how to stretch $1 is just as important as knowing how to split an atom." But the best lessons came during our heart-to-heart talks. "Anna, sweetie," she said one day as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "Not everyone's born a genius, but everyone can make the world a little better. You remember that." Those words became my lifeline in a house where I never seemed to measure up. At school, Sarah continued to shine. She participated in every academic competition, bringing home trophies and medals that Mom would display proudly in the living room. My report cards, on the other hand, were hidden away in a drawer, never to see the light of day. High school was a struggle. While Sarah breezed through AP classes and SAT prep, I was just trying to keep my head above water. Math was my nemesis, and no matter how hard I tried, the numbers just wouldn't cooperate. The day we got our SAT scores was the final straw. Sarah, of course, had aced it. Me? Let's just say my score wouldn't be getting me into any colleges. "A dumbass, that's what you are," Dad yelled, waving my score report in my face. "How can you be so stupid? It's simple addition, for God's sake." Mom stood by, shaking her head in disgust. "And Sarah?" She leaned against the doorframe, a smug smile playing on her lips. Not once did she step in to defend me. Not once did she offer to help. She just watched, probably thinking how lucky she was to be the smart one. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, as my parents continued their tirade. You can't even add 2 plus 2. How do you expect to get into college? To make something of yourself? Their words cut deep, each one a reminder of how I'd never be good enough. But somewhere in the midst of their shouting, I felt something else stirring. Anger, determination. A fierce desire to prove them wrong. As I lay in bed that night, their harsh words still ringing in my ears, I made a decision. I might not be cut out for college, at least not right now. But that didn't mean I couldn't make something of myself. The day after graduation, I marched into Sunny's supermarket and got myself a job as a cashier. It wasn't glamorous, but you know what? For the first time in my life, I had something that was all my own. Within weeks, I was pulling in my own paychecks. I told my parents I'd found a job, but they barely looked up from their papers. They didn't ask where or what I was doing, and honestly, I was relieved. At least this way, they couldn't disapprove. I was still living at home, but now I had my own money. It wasn't much, but it was enough to have a little fun without having to beg my parents for cash. Anna, you coming to the beach this weekend? My friend and coworker from the store Lisa would call, and I'd grin, knowing I could say yes without worrying about the cost. While Sarah spent her summer buried in textbooks, preparing for her first semester at some fancy Ivy League school, I was living it up. Weekends at the beach, movie nights with friends, impromptu road trips, I was finally free to be me. Weeks turned into months, and I settled into my new life. Sure, it wasn't the life my parents had envisioned for me, but I was happy. Really happy. Then came that day. The day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the store was quiet, and I was restocking the gum display when I heard the automatic doors swish open. I looked up, my customary greeting on my lips, and froze. There, looking as prim and proper as ever, was my mother. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I saw the shock in her eyes, followed quickly by embarrassment. She turned, clearly intending to leave without a word. But some part of me, some naive, hopeful part, called out, "Mom, hey." She turned slowly, her face a mask of disdain. "Anna," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment, "what are you doing here?" I gestured to my name tag, trying to keep my voice light. "I work here. Have been for a few months now." Her eyes narrowed. "A saleswoman? Really, Anna? The daughter of a professor, reduced to this?" She waved her hand dismissively at the store around us. "What will our colleagues think if they find out my daughter is the lowest rung on the social ladder?" Her words hit me like a slap. I'd been proud of my independence, of earning my own way. But in her eyes, I was just an embarrassment. "I'm working honestly," I managed to say, my voice small. "I'm not doing anything wrong." But Mom was beyond reason. Her voice rose, drawing the attention of the few customers in the store. "You will quit this job immediately, do you hear me? I will not have you embarrassing our family like this. And you can forget about living under our roof if this is the path you choose." I stood there, rooted to the spot, as she stormed out of the store. The automatic door swished closed behind her, leaving a deafening silence in her wake. That night, I returned home with a heavy heart and tear-stained cheeks. The house was quiet, but the silence felt oppressive. Without a word, I went to my room and started packing. As I was zipping up my last suitcase, Mom appeared in the doorway. Instead of the concern I'd foolishly hoped for, her face showed only relief. "So, you finally decided to leave," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Good, it's for the best." Dad appeared behind her, nodding in agreement. "Remember to change your surname," he added. "We can't have you disgracing our family name with your choices." Their words stung, but I was beyond tears now. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'll take Grandpa's name. At least he knew how to love unconditionally." I grabbed my bags and walked out, not looking back. They didn't ask for my new address, and I didn't offer it. The next day, I moved in with Lisa. We'd become fast friends over the past few months, and when I told her what happened, she didn't hesitate to offer me her spare room. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as Lisa and I were scrolling through social media, I came across Sarah's profile. My finger hesitated over the unfollow button, but curiosity got the better of me. Sarah's feed was a parade of achievements. Photos of her receiving awards, status updates about her latest research breakthroughs, announcements of her admission to elite scientific societies. Each post had hundreds of likes and comments, all singing her praises. "Your sister?" Lisa asked, peering over my shoulder. "Have you talked to her recently?" I shook my head, remembering our last interaction. It was a few weeks after I'd left home. In a moment of weakness, I'd reached out to Sarah, suggesting we meet for coffee. Her response was cold and dismissive. "Anna, I'm afraid we don't have much in common anymore. Our interests and, frankly, our levels of development are quite different now. I don't think meeting would be productive for either of us." That was the last time we communicated directly. Despite the rift with my immediate family, I stayed in touch with my extended relatives. Aunt Martha, in particular, became a source of comfort and connection to my roots. During one of our regular phone calls, she let slip some information that simultaneously hurt and validated my decision to leave. "Oh, Anna," she sighed, her voice heavy with sadness. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your parents, they always ask if you'll be at family gatherings. If we say yes, they refuse to come. They say it's because you're beneath their status now, and they can't bear to be in the same room as you." I felt a familiar ache in my chest, but it was duller now. "It's okay, Aunt Martha," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "I'm happy with my life now. If they can't accept that, it's their loss." And it was true. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had a job I enjoyed, friends who accepted me for who I was, and a growing sense of self-worth that had nothing to do with academic achievements or social status. 5 years had passed since I'd walked out of my parents' house, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I'd been promoted to assistant manager at the store, my circle of friends had grown, and I'd even started taking some online classes in business management. I was content, but something was missing. That all changed on a balmy summer evening. My friends had organized a beach bonfire, and I noticed him. He was standing a little apart from the group, looking slightly out of place in his button-down shirt and khakis. But it was his eyes that caught my attention, they seemed to sparkle with curiosity as he took in the scene around him. I made my way over, extending my hand. "Hi, I'm Anna. You look like you could use a S more." He laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made me smile. "I'm David. And yes, I could definitely use a S more. It's been years since I've had one." As we roasted marshmallows, we got to talking. Turns out, David was an environmental scientist, fresh off a research expedition in the Amazon. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. David was fascinated by my stories of customer service adventures, and I was enthralled by his passion for the environment. As the weeks turned into months, David and I grew closer. He didn't care that I hadn't gone to college or that I worked as a saleswoman. He loved my quick wit, my ability to make friends with anyone, and what he called my refreshing perspective on life. I met his family at a dinner party 6 months into our relationship. I was nervous, after all, they were all accomplished scientists. But to my surprise, they welcomed me with open arms. Throughout the evening, they asked about my job, my interests, my dreams. Not once did they ask about my education or my family background. It was refreshing. A year to the day after we met, David proposed. It was nothing grand, just the two of us, on the same beach where we'd first talked. But it was perfect. We planned a small wedding, just close friends and family. As I addressed the invitations, I hesitated over 3 names, Mom, Dad, and Sarah. Despite everything, a part of me still hoped. But the RSVPs came back, and those 3 remained silent. Life with David was everything I'd ever dreamed of and more. We'd settled into a cozy routine, balancing his research work with my job at the store. But as content as I was, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something more. That something more came on a lazy Sunday afternoon at David's parents' house. We were all lounging in the backyard, enjoying the warm sunshine and cold lemonade, when the conversation turned to David's latest research. The amount of plastic waste we're producing is staggering, David sighed, running a hand through his hair. And the worst part is, most of it ends up in landfills or the ocean. His father nodded gravely. It's a crisis, no doubt about it. But what can we do? People aren't going to stop using plastic overnight. As they continued discussing the problem, an idea started forming in my mind. Years of working retail had taught me a thing or two about what people want and need. And all those hours I'd spent with Mrs. Jenkins, learning to be resourceful and creative, suddenly came rushing back. Before I knew it, I was grabbing a napkin and a pen from the table. What if, I started, my voice trembling with excitement, what if we could turn that plastic waste into something useful? Something people actually want? 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, curious. Encouraged, I continued, sketching rapidly on the napkin. Like this, I said, holding up my crude drawing. Garden furniture made entirely from recycled plastic. Durable, weather-resistant, and eco-friendly. We could even make it modular, so people can customize their own designs. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I feared I'd overstepped, that they'd laugh at my silly idea. But then, Anna, David's father said slowly, his eyes wide with amazement, that's brilliant. David was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Do you know how many environmental problems this could solve? And the market potential, it's enormous. His mother chimed in, and it's not just garden furniture. Think of all the urban applications, park benches, playground equipment, even building materials. What happened next was a whirlwind. David's parents, excited by the potential of the idea, offered to invest in making it a reality. Before I knew it, we were setting up a company, with me, Anna Holloway, former family disappointment, as the CEO. David, with his scientific background, took charge of developing the technology to recycle and mold the plastic efficiently. I focused on design and marketing, drawing on my years of customer service experience to create products people would love. 6 months after that fateful Sunday afternoon, we launched our first line of garden furniture. The response was overwhelming. People loved the sleek designs, the eco-friendly concept, and the story behind it all. Encouraged by our success, we expanded our range. Urban planners started reaching out, interested in using our recycled plastic products for city projects. And then, the call that changed everything, the mayor's office wanted to meet with us. We met and signed a contract for the improvement of the city. 3 years had passed since that fateful day in David's parents' backyard. Our company, EcoRenew, had grown beyond our wildest dreams. We'd recycled tons of plastic waste, transformed city parks, and even started branching out into eco-friendly building materials. And now, here we were, about to receive a state award for innovation and environmental impact. As David and I stood in the grand ballroom, surrounded by the crème de la crème of the scientific and business world, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. We made our way through the crowd, stopping to chat with various dignitaries and fellow innovators. I was in the middle of a conversation with the city's head of urban development when I saw them. My parents and Sarah, standing near the refreshment table. They looked different. Mom and Dad had aged considerably, their hair more gray than I remembered. And Sarah, always so put together, looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, our eyes met across the room. I saw the shock register on their faces, clearly not expecting to see me in such a setting. I turned to David, linking my arm through his. "Let's go find your parents," I said, perhaps a bit louder than necessary. As we walked past my family, I kept my eyes forward, chin held high. We found David's parents near the stage, beaming with pride. As we chatted about the upcoming ceremony, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. My mother was approaching, her eyes fixed on David's mom. "Excuse me," I heard her say, her voice sickly sweet. "I couldn't help but notice your lovely family." You must be so proud of your son and his wife. I tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But my mother-in-law just smiled warmly. Oh, we are. Anna is a remarkable woman. We're lucky to have her in our family. As she walked back to my father and Sarah, I could see them huddling together, whispering furiously. I caught snippets of their conversation. Can't believe it's her. Married into a family of scientists. Probably just here as his plus one. The moment had finally arrived. As the presenter called my name, announcing EcoRenew as the recipient of the State Environmental Innovation Award, I felt a surge of pride. I walked onto the stage, my heart pounding with excitement. As I reached for the microphone, ready to deliver the speech I'd carefully prepared, chaos erupted. My mother rushed onto the stage. Before I could react, she had grabbed my arm and snatched the microphone from my hand. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, her voice quavering with emotion, I am the proud mother of this brilliant, worthy woman. She gestured dramatically towards me. We always knew Anna would become someone extraordinary. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, as she continued her performance, even managing to squeeze out a few tears. The audience, recognizing the famous Professor Anderson, broke into applause. In that moment, rage and hurt bubbled up inside me, years of neglect, disappointment, and rejection crystallizing into a single, burning point of resolve. I would not let her steal this moment. I gently but firmly took the microphone back from her. Thank you, Mother, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm of emotions inside me. If I could have a moment of silence, please. The room hushed, all eyes on me. Yes, I am the daughter of the renowned Professors Anderson, I began, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. But I stand before you today not because of them, but despite them. I saw shock ripple through the audience, my mother's face paling beside me. I recounted the years of missed school events, of being told I was an embarrassment, of being asked to change my name and move out. I worked as a saleswoman, hiding my identity, because my own parents were ashamed of me. The room was dead silent, hanging on every word. But today, I stand before you not as a failure, but as a success. Not because of my